Have you ever thought you knew the people closest to you, only to discover a secret that shatters everything? That's exactly what happened to me one quiet evening in Portland, Oregon. Through the lens of my own security cameras, I witnessed something I never imagined. For privacy reasons, I've changed their names and locations, but every detail you're about to hear is real. So stay with me and follow the story to the end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now to catch the newest stories. Like this video and comment "I'm listening" so we can stay connected on this journey together. It was a rainy evening in March 2023 in Portland, Oregon. The cedar shingles of 1258 Maple Avenue dripped steadily, the sound of water tapping against the old gutters mixing with the faint creak of the wooden porch. Inside that two-story home lived Mrs. Linda Parker, a 70-year-old retired elementary school teacher and widow. She had taught hundreds of children to read and write at Maplewood Elementary and had spent decades decorating bulletin boards with bright paper flowers. Since her husband's passing 2 years earlier, the big house had grown quiet. That was until her only daughter, Emily Parker, 35, and Emily's husband, Daniel Hughes, 37, moved in to take care of her. At first, Linda was grateful for the company. Daniel, a former real estate agent between jobs, mowed the lawn and carried groceries. Emily cooked dinner and tidied up the kitchen. Friends from church told Linda she was lucky to have family living with her. But there had been small moments lately, a misplaced bank statement, a locked drawer left open, that made her stomach tighten without knowing why. That night, with the rain still whispering outside, Linda sat at the kitchen table sipping chamomile tea. The dim light from a hanging lamp cast soft circles on the oak surface. She remembered she had recently installed a new Ring doorbell camera to replace the old one, but she hadn't mentioned it to Emily yet. Absent-mindedly, she reached for her phone and opened the Ring app. The live feed flickered for a second, then sharpened. Her heart stumbled. On the screen she saw Daniel, his hood pulled up though it wasn't raining, inside the garage, carrying one of her old blue file boxes, the box where she kept her pension papers, her house deed, her will, down the narrow steps to the basement. He glanced around as if to check no one was watching. "Dear God, what is he doing?" Linda whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain. She lowered the volume on the TV so she could hear better through the camera's tiny microphone. Daniel set the box on a workbench, then opened the lid and began leafing through folders with the brisk confidence of someone who had done it before. Linda's hands trembled. She set her teacup down too hard and it rattled against the saucer. "Why would Daniel need my pension papers?" "My will?" she murmured. Her mind raced back to small hints Emily had dropped. "We just want to help you organize your documents, Mom," she had said one afternoon. "You shouldn't have to worry about all that paperwork." It had sounded caring at the time. Now it echoed like a warning. Linda stared at the tiny screen, her throat dry. She had once scolded children in her classroom for lying, now she was staring at her own son-in-law sneaking through her life like a stranger. She realized, with a chill, that forgetting to tell Emily about the new camera had accidentally protected her. What she was seeing wasn't just a harmless mistake, it felt like the opening scene of a nightmare she couldn't yet name. The next morning in Portland dawned gray and cool, the kind of spring morning when mist hangs low over the fir trees lining Maple Avenue. Linda Parker stood at the kitchen counter buttering a slice of toast, the radio softly playing an old Motown song she loved from her teaching days. Emily had just breezed through the kitchen in yoga pants and a puffy jacket, calling over her shoulder, "Mom, I'm running to Safeway to pick up groceries, milk, eggs, and your favorite herbal tea." Daniel followed a few minutes later, pulling on his leather jacket. "I've got a client meeting downtown," he said, avoiding her eyes as he slipped his phone into his pocket. Linda smiled politely, murmuring, "Drive safe, both of you." When the front door closed, she exhaled. The house grew silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock she'd hung 30 years ago. She poured herself coffee, but her hands trembled enough to spill a few drops. Something about their rushed departure felt staged. Almost without thinking, she reached for her phone and opened the Ring app again, a habit she'd developed since last night's discovery. The screen came alive with the wide-angle view of her living room. Her heart lurched. Emily was not at Safeway. Daniel was not with a client. They were both right there, in her house. Emily had spread a neat fan of papers across the polished oak dining table: pension statements, property deeds, insurance policies, the very documents Linda kept locked in a metal file box upstairs. Daniel, crouched beside her, was holding a small penlight between his teeth as he flipped through each sheet like a bank clerk balancing a till. "Did you find the health insurance policy yet?" Emily's voice floated up, cool and businesslike. "Not yet," Daniel muttered, setting one folder aside. "It's probably in the upstairs safe. I'll check in a minute." Linda's breath caught. She leaned closer to the phone as if proximity could change what she was seeing. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her pulse thudded in her ears. This wasn't a moment of innocent tidying up. Their movements were practiced, efficient, they had done this before. Then she heard a name that made her stomach twist. "Mr. Carter will want the originals," Emily said, glancing at her phone. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "He said to have everything ready by Friday." Mr. Carter. A lawyer Emily had once introduced as a family friend but whose slick smile had unsettled Linda at a church fundraiser last year. She had brushed off her suspicions then, but now the pieces slid into place like a cruel puzzle. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the cool chain of her wedding ring hanging on a necklace there. Her mind raced: forged signatures, stolen deeds, the house she and her late husband had built a life in, gone. She whispered to the empty kitchen, "They're trying to take everything." On the little screen, Emily straightened up, brushing invisible dust from her hands. "Once we get her to sign, we're set," she said softly. Linda's coffee had gone cold. The betrayal didn't feel abstract anymore, it felt like a blade pressing against her ribs. She realized with icy clarity that she wasn't just a mother or a widow in this moment. She was the target of a scheme unfolding in her own living room. The house on Maple Avenue had always been more than just timber and paint. Built in 1948, with creaky oak floors and a porch swing that looked out onto a row of towering Douglas firs, it had been Linda Parker's refuge for over 4 decades. She and her late husband, Thomas, once a merchant seaman who spent years at sea, had bought the place with 30 years of disciplined saving. Every corner told a story: the dent in the banister from when Emily learned to ride her first tricycle indoors on a rainy afternoon, the sunlit kitchen where Thomas would hum Old Navy songs while making pancakes on Sundays. By spring 2023, Portland's real estate market had exploded. Zillow notifications pinged Linda's phone with offers she never asked for, each one higher than the last. The city's boom meant her modest 2-story home was suddenly worth $650,000, maybe even $700,000 in the right hands. Linda would glance at those emails, smile, and delete them. This was her home, not a commodity. That's why the words she heard over her Bluetooth earpiece that morning felt like ice water down her back. From the Ring camera feed in the living room, Emily's voice was cool, calculated, unrecognizable. "If we just transfer the title, we can sell it fast for $700,000, Emily said, flipping through Linda's property tax papers with the precision of a bank clerk. "That's enough for a townhouse in Seattle and to put her in Sunrise Home." Sunrise Home. Linda knew the place. She'd once visited a former colleague there. Clean but sterile, with the faint smell of disinfectant and loneliness in the hallways. Her daughter's tone wasn't one of concern, it was logistics, like she was arranging a storage unit, not her mother's future. Daniel, standing near the window, nodded as if sealing a deal. "She's old," he said matter-of-factly. "Why would she even want to stay here?" Linda sat alone at the small round kitchen table she'd bought from a yard sale 30 years ago, a chipped blue mug between her hands. The hum of her refrigerator seemed deafening. Her fingers gripped the mug so tightly she thought it might crack. Through the earpiece, she could hear the faint shuffle of papers, the muted thump of Daniel's footsteps, Emily's measured breathing. She whispered to herself, "This isn't just a house. This is our life." She pictured Thomas coming home from the docks, smelling of salt and diesel, pressing his cold hands against her cheeks. She saw Emily as a newborn, swaddled in a pink blanket, brought home from the hospital through that same front door. She saw Thomas's final days, sitting by his bedside in the downstairs guest room when he was too weak to climb the stairs. The betrayal cut deeper than any legal scheme. It was the casual way Emily said send her to Sunrise and the flatness in Daniel's agreement. Linda blinked back tears, pressing a hand to her chest as if to steady her heart. She felt a mix of grief, disbelief, and a slow-burning anger rising under her skin. She turned off the Bluetooth, set her mug down, and looked around her kitchen, white cabinets she and Thomas had painted together, the old clock ticking steadily above the doorway. This wasn't just equity on a spreadsheet. This was her husband's memory, her motherhood, her independence. And someone she loved was trying to strip it all away. Upstairs, the old pine staircase creaked softly under Daniel's weight. Through the Ring camera Linda had hidden inside the hallway's smoke detector, she could see him moving with the impatience of someone who believed he owned the place. The morning light from the dormer window cut across his face as he knelt in front of the small safe she kept in her bedroom closet, a beige metal box no bigger than a suitcase. For decades it had held her most important documents, original deeds, life insurance policies, Thomas's Navy pension papers, even Emily's birth certificate. Linda sat downstairs at the kitchen table, clutching her phone so hard her knuckles whitened. The live feed played silently except for the faint sound of drawers opening and closing. Daniel muttered to himself as he flipped through envelopes. "Where is it? Where is it?" His voice was low, tense. Then he stood up abruptly, brushing dust from his knees. "It's not here," he said, reappearing in the living room a few minutes later. The camera caught the frustration in his movements as he tossed a stack of photocopies back onto the table. Emily, still seated with her laptop open and papers spread around her like a battlefield, barely looked up. "We need the originals by Friday, Daniel," she reminded him sharply. Mr. Carter said no originals, no deal. She tapped her manicured nails on the table, a rhythmic, impatient sound. "I know, Emily." "I looked everywhere," Daniel snapped back. "Maybe she moved them. She's been acting weird lately." Linda felt a wave of nausea. They were talking about her like she was a problem to solve, not a mother. On the feed, Emily's lips tightened. "Well, even the $1,000 she gives us every month barely covers groceries. She calls it support, but to me it's pocket change." Daniel smirked, leaning against the doorway. "She's paranoid. We'll just have to do the health insurance trick, make it look like something routine so she signs without reading." He chuckled, a short, cold laugh that made Linda's stomach twist. Downstairs, Linda whispered to herself, "Health insurance trick?" Her fingers trembled against the screen. She had spent weeks feeling guilty for doubting them, wondering if she was imagining things. But here it was, said plainly. They were building a story of a confused old woman, planting seeds that she was losing it. On the screen, Emily gave a small, knowing smile. Exactly. She's been forgetting things anyway. All we need to do is push the narrative a little. By the time she realizes, it'll be done. Linda pressed her free hand over her mouth, fighting back a sob. The kitchen around her felt suddenly unfamiliar, like she was in someone else's house. The smell of cinnamon from the candle she'd lit earlier seemed nauseating. They weren't just planning a fraud, they were eroding her sanity, making her question her own memory. She stared at the phone, at the people she had welcomed into her home, and felt something inside her harden. If they thought she was going to sign her life away under the pretense of health insurance, they had underestimated the teacher who had once managed 30 unruly children every day. That evening, the Parker house seemed wrapped in an almost eerie stillness. A fine drizzle pattered against the windows, and the streetlights along Maple Avenue flickered on one by one, casting soft cones of yellow on the wet pavement. In her upstairs bedroom, Linda Parker sat on the edge of her quilted bedspread, her slippers still on, the glow from her phone screen lighting up her lined face. She had left the Ring app running, its little green light felt like her only ally now. On the live feed from the living room, Emily and Daniel sat close together on the couch where Linda used to read bedtime stories to her daughter. Papers lay between them like playing cards, a neat stack with a black folder on top. Emily's voice cut through the soft background hum of the refrigerator. "Tomorrow," she said, her lips curling into a half smile, "I'll bring the updated will papers for her to sign. If we keep it simple, she won't even ask questions." Daniel hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Emily, she raised you. She's fed us for years. Maybe we should." "Daniel, wake up," Emily interrupted sharply. Her tone had that practiced patience Linda recognized from years of teaching, except now it was her daughter wielding it like a blade. "This is our chance to build a future. We can't let guilt stop us." She reached over, placed a hand on Daniel's arm, and added in a softer voice, "We deserve this. We've been waiting too long." Daniel exhaled, his shoulders slumping, and gave a reluctant nod. "Okay," he muttered. "Tomorrow, then." Linda pressed her palm to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her breath felt shallow, like she was underwater. She could see every detail on the screen, Emily's polished nails tapping the folder, the flicker of excitement in her eyes, the way she tilted her head just slightly as she spoke, like a salesperson closing a deal. It was a face Linda had never seen before, or perhaps had refused to see. In her room, the familiar scent of lavender from the sachets in her dresser suddenly made her stomach twist. She remembered brushing Emily's hair at that same dresser when she was a little girl, telling her stories about honesty and kindness. She whispered to the empty room, "Emily, my baby, what happened to you?" Her voice cracked on the last word. The clock on her nightstand ticked steadily, indifferent. Outside, a train horn wailed faintly in the distance. Downstairs, Emily laughed quietly at something Daniel said, a soft, conspiratorial laugh that didn't belong to the daughter who used to leave handmade Mother's Day cards on Linda's pillow. Linda sat straighter, blinking away tears. The shock was still there, but underneath it, something else was forming, resolve. She felt like a woman watching a bridge burn but realizing she still had time to build another path. She might be 70, but she wasn't helpless. Not yet. For the next 3 days, Linda Parker lived what felt like a double life inside her own home on Maple Avenue. By daylight she slipped back into the familiar role of a soft-spoken mother, apron tied neatly at her waist, frying pancakes on the old cast-iron griddle her late husband had once bought at a yard sale. The kitchen smelled of butter and maple syrup. She asked Emily and Daniel about their plans with a smile that trembled at the edges. "Daniel, are you meeting another client today?" she would say lightly, placing a plate in front of him. "Emily, did you find that recipe you wanted?" Her voice sounded almost normal, but her heart pounded each time she glanced at her phone, propped discreetly against the sugar jar, recording every word. By night, however, Linda transformed. Once the house fell silent and the two of them retired to the guest room, she became her own private investigator. She would sit at the small desk in her bedroom, scrolling through the recordings she had captured, cataloging timestamps in a little spiral notebook she kept hidden inside a shoebox. Her hands shook at first, but she grew steadier with each note she took. "Keep breathing," she whispered to herself. "Just keep breathing." On the second evening, as she listened to the audio feed, she caught Emily's dismissive tone. "Don't worry about her," her daughter said with a soft laugh. "She just watches TV dramas all day. She thinks everything is a conspiracy." Linda felt the sting of the words like a slap. She pressed pause, closed her eyes. The woman she had raised was mocking her like a caricature of a nosy old lady. She wanted to cry, but instead she wrote the quote down verbatim. The next morning at breakfast, Linda watched Daniel take a call. He leaned back in his chair, pretending to scroll through messages. "Yeah, I'll send the contract later," he said, but the phone screen was dark. He had no client, no deal, just another layer of the performance meant to lull her into trust. Linda took a sip of coffee to hide the trembling of her lips. "How's business?" she asked gently. Daniel smiled without looking at her. Busy, he replied. In her notebook that night, she wrote, "Daniel has not signed any contract. No real clients." The realization settled over her like cold water. Their entire story, their errands, their promises, their supposed care, was a carefully built stage set. And she had been the unwitting audience. Yet amid the hurt, Linda also felt something new, a sense of quiet determination. She looked at her reflection in the dark window, the faint outline of a 70-year-old woman holding a phone like a shield. "They think I'm weak," she murmured. "Let them think so. I'll play my part." In that moment, between the clatter of their dishes and the whispers of their schemes, Linda Parker began writing a different script, one where she was no longer just a victim but the narrator of her own defense. Wednesday arrived gray and damp, the kind of Portland morning where the clouds hang low enough to brush the treetops. Linda Parker stood at the kitchen counter making tea, her hands steady though her heart raced. She knew today was the day Emily and Daniel would try their final move. She had ironed her blouse, brushed her hair, and set out the good china as if expecting polite company. On the surface, she looked like a grateful mother being cared for by her daughter. Inside, she was bracing for a storm. Around 10 o'clock the front door opened. Emily came in first, her heels clicking on the wooden floor, a leather tote slung over her shoulder. Daniel followed with a stiff smile, holding a thick envelope. "Hi, Mom," Emily sang out sweetly, the tone that once belonged to childhood but now felt rehearsed. "We've brought something important to make sure you're financially secure." She set the tote on the dining table and began to pull out papers neatly clipped together. Linda dried her hands on a dish towel and walked over slowly. "Oh," she said mildly. "What's all this?" "It's just a simple medical power of attorney," Emily replied, smoothing a stack of pages. Her voice was soft, careful, almost coaxing. "Mr. Carter prepared it for us. It will make sure your bills are paid and your healthcare decisions are taken care of." Daniel pulled a chair out for Linda, but there was an edge to his movements. "Yeah, Mom, it's nothing complicated. Just sign here and here," he said, tapping the signature lines with a capped pen. "The tax laws are changing soon, we don't want you caught unprepared." Linda sat down, folding her hands in her lap, and looked at the papers. She recognized some of the language from her days teaching civics, but most of it was written in dense legalese: irrevocable, grantor, transfer of authority. She kept her expression blank. "Well," she said lightly, "I should read it first. I've always been careful with paperwork." Emily's smile tightened. "Mom, you can trust us. We're only thinking of your well-being." Linda tilted her head. "I know, sweetheart. But old habits die hard." Daniel's jaw clenched. He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Just sign it, Mom. We're trying to help you. Don't drag this out." The polite mask slipped, impatience flashed in his eyes. Linda lowered her gaze to the papers, pretending to read. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She had rehearsed this moment in her head the night before. "Could I have one more day to look it over?" she asked gently. "Just to be sure." A pause hung in the room like heavy smoke. Emily and Daniel exchanged a quick glance, one of those silent conversations people have when they're worried. Daniel straightened up, forcing a smile. "Sure, Mom. One more day." Linda nodded, sliding the papers back toward them. "Thank you. I'll sleep better after I read it." She stood, taking her teacup to the sink. Behind her, she could feel their eyes on her, measuring, recalculating. As she rinsed the cup, the water running over her trembling fingers, she allowed herself the smallest breath of relief. Their plan wasn't as airtight as they thought. The performance had cracked, just a little, and she was still holding the script. The following morning the house on Maple Avenue felt strangely heavy, as though even the old oak beams sensed what was coming. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window while the smell of toast and coffee hung in the air. Linda Parker sat at the dining table with her reading glasses perched low on her nose, the stack of medical power of attorney papers lying between her and her daughter and son-in-law. She had been polite for days, playing along, but something in her chest had hardened overnight. Daniel stood on the other side of the table, arms crossed, his phone face down beside him. Emily hovered nearby, her smile taut like a rubber band about to snap. "Mom," Emily said, voice syrupy, "we need to get this done today. Mr. Carter is waiting." Linda flipped another page slowly, deliberately. "I said I'd read it first." Daniel's patience broke. He slammed his palm on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "Just sign it, Mom." His voice echoed through the room, startling even Emily. "We're trying to help you. Stop being so difficult." Linda pushed her chair back and rose, her heart hammering but her face calm. "Enough," she said, her voice firm and clear. "I may be old, but I'm not stupid." She picked up the stack of papers, pressed them to her chest like a shield, and walked toward the hallway. Both of them froze. Daniel blinked at her as if seeing a stranger. Emily's mouth opened but no sound came out. "Mom," she began, but Linda cut her off. "These stay with me until I'm ready," she said, and without waiting for a reply she strode down the hall, her slippers whispering on the hardwood floor. She opened the safe in her bedroom closet and slid the documents inside, the metal door clicking shut with a finality that made her feel stronger. That night, Linda lay in bed with the Ring app open, the glow of the screen illuminating her tired face. Her phone sat on the nightstand, quietly recording. Downstairs, she could hear the low murmur of voices through the vents. On the feed she saw Emily pacing, arms crossed, while Daniel spoke into his phone. "We'll cut her spending," he said bluntly. "Cancel the extra insurance, stop paying for her prescriptions. She'll have to sign eventually." Emily nodded, rubbing her temples. "She's stubborn, but if we tighten the screws she'll break. No one can live without money forever." Linda felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. It wasn't just greed anymore, it was a calculated plan to starve her into compliance, economic abuse as deliberate as any weapon. She pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders, whispering into the dark, "Not me. Not like this." For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like someone who had just drawn a line in the sand. Tomorrow would be different. That Thursday morning the Parker house smelled of coffee and damp wood. Linda sat in the sunroom pretending to knit, her phone hidden under a stack of magazines recording everything. Through the open vent she could hear Daniel's voice from the kitchen, low but sharp. "Yes, cancel the Medicare supplement," he was saying into his phone. "Yes, I have legal authority. She gave me power of attorney." His tone was smooth, confident, like someone ordering office supplies. Linda's hands clenched around the yarn. Power of attorney? She had never signed anything of the sort. Her heart thudded as she listened. A chair scraped across the tile. Emily's voice joined in, brisk and businesslike. "Okay, here's what we're cutting. No more special medication orders, no more Uber health rides to appointments. She's too used to her routines. Break the routines and she'll sign." Linda felt her stomach twist. She had raised Emily to make lists for groceries, for chores, for schoolwork. Now her daughter was making a list to dismantle her life. Emily's tone was chillingly casual, as if discussing a remodeling project. "When she has nothing left, she'll give in," Emily said flatly. In the sunroom, the knitting needles slipped from Linda's hands and clattered to the floor. She picked them up slowly, her breath uneven. For a moment she almost believed the story they were weaving about her, an old, confused woman. But then something steadier rose inside her. They were wrong. She was not helpless, and she would not be bullied. That night, when the house finally grew quiet and the guest room door clicked shut, Linda sat at her small desk under the lamp's warm glow. Her fingers moved quickly despite the tremor in them. She plugged a new blue USB stick into her laptop, copying every audio file, every video clip, every note she had made. Timestamps, quotes, images, she organized them like a teacher preparing evidence for a school board meeting. Then she opened her email and typed a message to her oldest friend, Susan Miller, a retired nurse now living in Eugene. "Susan, I'm sending you something in case anything happens to me. Please keep it safe. Don't tell anyone yet. She attached the files, double-checked the recipient, and hit send. A small beep confirmed the message had gone. Leaning back, she exhaled slowly. The room smelled faintly of lavender and printer ink. Outside, a train passed, its low horn like a distant warning. But she didn't feel scared anymore. In her hands she held not just evidence but power, the kind of power that could name crimes like financial fraud and elder abuse. She whispered to herself, "You think you're trapping me, but you've just trapped yourselves." She closed the laptop, tucked the USB into her bra for safekeeping, and turned off the light. For the first time in weeks she slept deeply, knowing she was no longer just surviving their scheme but preparing to fight back. Friday morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through the kitchen blinds in narrow stripes. Linda Parker stood at the stove scrambling eggs, her back straight, her mind rehearsing what she needed to say. She had not slept much, the USB sat hidden in her nightstand like a secret weapon. Today she would stop pretending. At 9 o'clock Emily and Daniel emerged from the guest room dressed neatly as if for a meeting. They carried the air of people about to make a sales pitch. Emily placed a stack of mail on the table and sighed theatrically. "Mom, we need to talk about the bills," she began. Her voice was sweet but her eyes sharp. "The bank accounts are a mess. We can't keep paying for everything unless you sign those papers from yesterday. It's the only way to stabilize things." Daniel nodded gravely, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "We've been covering so many expenses," he added, his tone rehearsed. "If you just sign, we can make sure you're secure. Otherwise, well, we can't keep this up." Linda set down the spatula and turned off the burner. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the clock. She wiped her hands on a towel, walked to the table, and stood over them. For days she had played along, but now the mask came off. "Stop," she said quietly. "Stop pretending this is about me." Emily blinked, still smiling. "Mom, what do you mean?" "We're just—" "No," Linda interrupted, her voice rising. "This is about what you want, not what I need. Don't call it care when it's betrayal." She slapped her palm lightly on the papers lying between them. "I know exactly what's in these. I know about Mr. Carter. I know about your plan to sell this house and put me in a facility." Daniel's mouth opened but no words came out. He looked genuinely startled, his practiced composure slipping. Emily's smile remained but it had turned brittle, like glass about to crack. "Mom," she said softly, "you're overreacting." Linda straightened, her eyes fierce. "No. I'm reacting exactly right. You've been plotting behind my back in my own home. You've called me confused, old, paranoid. But I'm not confused, I'm awake. And I have proof." She pulled her phone from her apron pocket and placed it on the table. The screen glowed with the Ring app open. "Every word, every plan, every threat," she said, her voice calm now. "It's all here." For a moment the only sound was the clock ticking. Daniel glanced at Emily, his face pale. Emily's lips pressed together in a thin line, but she tried one last dismissive laugh. "You're dramatizing this, Mom." Linda leaned forward, her hands on the table. "No. I'm done being your victim. You wanted a signature? You've got a witness instead." In that moment she no longer looked like a frail 70-year-old woman. She looked like someone who had stepped out of the shadows into the light, armed with evidence, with a plan, and with the unshakable dignity of someone who refuses to be erased. Friday afternoon, March 17, 2023. The low Oregon sun slanted through the lace curtains of the Parker living room, casting delicate patterns across the worn oak floor. The clock on the mantel ticked softly. Linda Parker had arranged the room like a stage, the coffee table cleared, 2 chairs facing hers, a pot of tea steaming gently. She had spent the morning rehearsing her words in her head, smoothing her dress with trembling hands, feeling the weight of 70 years and the sharp edge of betrayal. When Emily and Daniel came down the stairs, they found her waiting in the armchair where she used to read bedtime stories to Emily. "Sit down," she said, her voice low but steady. They exchanged a look, but obeyed. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, arms folded, while Emily perched next to him, her phone still in her hand. "I know everything," Linda began. Her voice quivered on the first word but grew firmer with each syllable. Daniel frowned, a crease forming between his brows. "Know what?" he asked, trying for a laugh that didn't quite land. Linda reached into her cardigan pocket and set her phone down on the coffee table. With a single tap, the living room filled with their own voices, recorded from nights they thought she was asleep. Emily's tone came first, unmistakable, "Transfer the title, then we'll send her to Sunrise Home." Then Daniel's voice, "She'll sign once we cut her off." Emily's face drained of color. Her manicured fingers tightened around her phone. "Mom," she whispered, You recorded us?" Linda looked at her daughter steadily. "No. The house recorded you," she said softly. "The cameras you thought were broken." Daniel's chair screeched against the floor as he stood abruptly and slammed his palm on the table. The teacups rattled. "What is this, Mom? You want to destroy your own family?" Linda didn't flinch. "No," she replied, her gaze fixed on his. "You already did that." For a heartbeat no one moved. Emily stared at the carpet, her lips parted but no words coming. Daniel's breathing was heavy, his fists clenched at his sides. The spring sunlight poured over them all, harsh and unblinking, like a spotlight. Linda felt her own hands trembling in her lap, but she didn't hide them. In that moment she was no longer the passive figure in the corner. She was the accuser, the witness, the mother who had finally stepped forward. "You tried to take my home. You tried to make me doubt my own mind. But I am not confused, and I am not alone." Daniel took a step back, his bluster faltering. Emily glanced at him, eyes wide, like a child caught in a lie. The shift in power was palpable, a current running through the room. Linda drew a breath, her heart still hammering, but her voice steady. "From this moment on," she said, "we're done with pretending." In that quiet spring afternoon, the roles had reversed. The woman they had underestimated now held the evidence, the truth, and the room. The living room on Maple Avenue had never felt so small. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds and golden bars, falling across the worn floral sofa and the coffee table where 3 untouched cups sat cooling. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood, but now there was a bitter undercurrent, fear, guilt, and anger mixing like smoke. Emily Parker suddenly shot to her feet, her knees bumping the coffee table. A cup toppled over, spilling dark coffee across a stack of unopened mail. "How long have you been spying on us?" she demanded, her voice rising. Her face was flushed, strands of hair sticking to her cheek. Linda sat back in her armchair, her phone still glowing on the table like a silent witness. Her hands trembled but her eyes were steady. "A week," she said clearly. "Long enough to have recordings of forged signatures, stolen files, and every word about sending me away." Daniel, still seated, shifted uneasily. His knee bounced. He looked less like a man in control and more like an animal sensing a trap. "Mom," he said, his tone almost pleading now, "just let me explain." "Explain what?" Linda cut in, her voice sharper than she had planned. "Explain how you and my daughter decided I was a burden to be removed?" Her chest rose and fell, but she kept going. "Explain why you thought I'd never notice you pawing through my safe?" Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Emily folded her arms, chin raised. "You don't understand, Mom. We're under pressure, you're alone, and..." Linda reached for the phone and scrolled to another clip. Her own voice trembled slightly as she read aloud, $700,000. Seattle. Sunrise Home. The words echoed in the small room like a judge reading a verdict. Emily's arms dropped. For a moment her mask slipped, showing something raw, panic, maybe even shame, but then her eyes hardened. She changed tack, her voice lower, colder. "Even if you have evidence," she said slowly, "what exactly are you planning to do with it?" The question wasn't a plea. It was a challenge. Linda felt her heart hammering, but she lifted her chin. "You'll find out soon enough," she replied. The tick of the clock on the wall grew louder, each second slicing the silence like a knife. Daniel rubbed his temples, muttering something under his breath. Emily's jaw clenched, the muscles moving under her skin. In that cramped living room, the dynamic had shifted entirely. The daughter and son-in-law who had strutted through the house days earlier now looked cornered. The 70-year-old woman they had underestimated sat across from them, small but immovable, with a week's worth of evidence and decades of self-control in her hands. The air was heavy, electric. Linda thought of her late husband's Navy motto, "Hold your line," and she felt it in her bones. This was no longer a conversation. This was a reckoning, and she was no longer afraid to be its voice. The room felt even smaller now, the afternoon light fading into a gray Portland drizzle outside. Rain streaked the window panes, blurring the view of the maple tree in the front yard. Inside, tension thickened like a storm cloud. Emily had stopped pacing. She straightened her blouse, drew a long breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted, measured, almost like a lawyer rehearsing a case. "So this is what it comes to," she said, her tone cool and deliberate. "You're really going to destroy our family over a house?" Her eyes locked on Linda's, unblinking. Linda let out a short, bitter laugh that surprised even herself. "Family?" she echoed, her voice breaking but strong. "You two tore this family apart long before I ever pressed record." Her fingers gripped the armrest of the chair, knuckles white. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low but insistent. "Mom, think about this. You're 70. No one's going to believe you. You'll just look like a confused old woman with some wild accusations." Linda's heart thudded so hard she felt it in her throat. But she kept her eyes on Daniel, the boy she'd once held through nightmares. "Is that what you're hoping?" she asked quietly. "That no one believes me?" Emily's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You know," she said softly, "all that evidence you think you have? It's illegal. Secret recordings, cameras without consent. Any halfway competent attorney could get it thrown out." She said attorney like a weapon, glancing at the phone on the table. Linda felt a sudden rush of heat in her chest. For a second, she faltered. They weren't just trying to take her home, they were building a story, brick by brick, to paint her as paranoid and unstable, to isolate her before she could act. She saw it now as clearly as the rain on the glass. Daniel reached out a hand, pretending to soothe. "We're not your enemies, Mom," he said softly. "We're worried about you. That's why we want you to sign these papers. So we can take care of you." Linda's hands shook in her lap, but her voice steadied. "Take care of me?" she whispered. "By stealing what I've worked for?" No one answered. The clock ticked loudly, every second a hammer blow. Emily stared at the floor. Daniel fiddled with his wedding band. Linda drew a slow breath, recalling the last card she had kept close. Dr. Bennett. Her family physician for 15 years, the one who knew her medical history inside and out. The one who had told her quietly, "You're sharp as a tack, Linda. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She straightened in her chair. "You think I'm alone," she said, her voice stronger now, "but I'm not. You've underestimated me." For the first time that afternoon, Daniel's eyes flickered with doubt. Emily crossed her arms tighter, her facade slipping just a little. Outside, the rain drummed on the roof, but inside, Linda felt a strange calm settle over her. The trap they thought they'd built was starting to crack, and she still had a move left to play. That rainy Thursday afternoon, the living room of the Maple Avenue house looked deceptively calm. The smell of brewed coffee still lingered from the morning. A faint tune from the radio playing in the kitchen drifted into the sitting area. Yet at the center of that cozy picture sat a battle no one outside could imagine. Emily settled herself on the edge of the sofa as if she were about to deliver a diagnosis. She smoothed her skirt, folded her hands like a therapist, and fixed Linda with a look that mixed pity and calculation. Her voice was soft, but each word felt like a needle. "You know, Mom," she began, tilting her head, "a 70-year-old woman who installs hidden cameras, imagines conspiracies, refuses to sign legal paperwork, that sounds a lot like paranoia." Linda blinked. For a moment she couldn't tell if she'd heard her daughter correctly. Emily's tone was so clinical, so rehearsed, it could have been lifted straight from a psychiatry manual. Daniel shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then crouched down beside Linda's chair. His hand hovered awkwardly near her shoulder before resting there. "Mom," he said gently, "we're just worried about you. Maybe you should talk to a professional, just to be safe." His voice trembled in that familiar way he used to win clients' trust when he was in real estate. Linda's heart thudded against her ribs. The words swirled around her: paranoia, professional, safe. They were building a new narrative right in front of her eyes. A narrative where she was no longer a victim of betrayal but a confused old woman needing intervention. She tried to steady her voice. "I am perfectly lucid," she said, but it came out thinner than she wanted, almost a plea. Emily leaned forward, eyes soft with feigned concern. "No one is saying you're not, Mom. We just think you'd feel better if you spoke to a specialist. Someone neutral." Daniel squeezed her shoulder lightly. "We really do care about you. We're trying to help," he murmured. Inside, Linda's stomach knotted. Their words were like honey poured over poison. They were turning truth into a symptom, her vigilance into delusion, her refusal to sign into stubbornness. And the worst part was that for a flicker of a second, she almost believed them. "What if I am overreacting?" she thought. "What if I'm just tired?" But then, like a light switching on, a name surfaced in her mind: Dr. Harold Peterson. Her family physician for 20 years at Portland Adventist Medical Center. The one who had seen her through 2 surgeries, countless checkups, and always told her gently, "You're sharp as a tack, Linda." She straightened her back, pulling away from Daniel's hand. "No," she said more firmly. "I don't need a specialist. I have a doctor. He knows me." Her voice was steadier now, the doubt draining out. Emily exchanged a quick glance with Daniel, the kind of silent look partners give when a plan isn't working as smoothly as they hoped. Outside, the rain kept tapping against the window. Inside, Linda felt the first stirrings of strength. She wasn't going to let them rewrite her story. That Saturday night, March 18th, the house on Maple Avenue was cloaked in a hush that felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. The television murmured softly in the background, a rerun of an old crime show flickering on mute. In her upstairs bedroom, Linda sat on the edge of her quilted bedspread, fingers trembling around her cell phone. She had just heard something through the baby monitor she had repurposed to listen to Daniel's study downstairs. Through the faint static came Daniel's voice, low and smooth but with an edge of urgency. "Dr. Peterson," he said, "I'm really worried about my mother-in-law. She's been acting confused. She hides documents, installs cameras, talks about conspiracies. I think she might be slipping into dementia." His words were so deliberate they could have been read from a script. Linda's stomach turned to ice. "They're building a false record about me," she thought, her pulse hammering in her ears. She strained to hear every syllable. Daniel continued, "She forgets things constantly. I don't know if she's safe making her own decisions anymore." His tone was almost sorrowful, like a dutiful son-in-law. The baby monitor hissed and went silent. Then she noticed the red light on her hidden camera in Daniel's study had gone dark, the audio feed had accidentally stopped. It was too perfect to be a coincidence. Linda wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Downstairs, she could hear Emily's sing-song voice drifting up the staircase. "Mom? Are you feeling tired tonight? You didn't look well at dinner." The words were coated in sweetness, but each one pricked like a thorn. A moment later, Emily appeared at the bedroom door, her face arranged in a mask of concern. She stepped inside, carrying a mug of chamomile tea. "Mom," she said softly, setting the cup on the nightstand, "are you sleeping okay? You've been restless lately." Linda stared at her daughter, trying to read the expression behind those soft eyes. She knew it was a trap. If she answered yes, it would confirm their narrative of frailty. If she said no, they could claim she lacked insight into her condition. The perfect no-win question. "I'm fine," Linda said flatly, her voice as neutral as she could make it. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, tapping the record button with her thumb. "Just tired from cooking all day." Emily smiled, but the corners of her lips didn't quite reach her eyes. "You should rest, Mom," she whispered, then left the room, closing the door with an almost imperceptible click. As soon as Emily's footsteps faded, Linda exhaled shakily and pressed stop on the recording. She labeled the audio file March 18th, Trap, and saved it to a hidden folder. She sat there for a long minute, staring at the glowing city lights outside her window, her heart pounding. That night, under the soft hum of the ceiling fan, she made up her mind. She would no longer wait for their next move. Picking up her phone, she scrolled to Dr. Harold Peterson, Portland Adventist Medical Center, and hovered over the call button. "If they're going to use him against me, I'll speak to him first," she thought. With a deep breath, she tapped the screen. "Dr. Peterson?" "This is Linda Parker," she said when he answered. Her voice was low but steady now. "I think my daughter and her husband are trying to have me declared incompetent. I need to tell you what's really happening." The decision felt like crossing a line, but also like stepping into the light after days of darkness. The next morning, March 19th, dawn crept over Portland with a thin mist hanging above Maple Avenue. The sound of Emily's SUV backing out of the driveway echoed faintly through the house. Linda stood at the kitchen counter, pretending to rinse a coffee mug until the taillights disappeared. She waited another minute, listening for the front door to click shut, then quickly dried her hands and reached for the cordless phone she had hidden under a stack of mail. Her heart was hammering as she dialed the familiar number. Portland Adventist Medical Center, Dr. Peterson's office, a receptionist answered. Linda swallowed hard. "This is Linda Parker," she said, her voice tight but clear. "I've been Dr. Peterson's patient for 20 years. I need to speak to him urgently. It's about my safety." There was a pause, the sound of typing, then the receptionist's voice softened. "Hold on just a moment, Mrs. Parker." The faint click of a transfer, and then a warm but alert voice came on the line. "Linda? This is Harold Peterson. What's going on?" Linda gripped the phone with both hands, staring at the lace curtains fluttering in the morning draft. "Harold," she began, her voice trembling, "I think Emily and Daniel are trying to have me declared incompetent. They're saying I'm paranoid. They're contacting you, making up stories." She took a shaky breath. "But I'm not crazy. I have proof." On the other end, she could hear his chair creak as he sat up straighter. "Proof? What kind of proof?" he asked quietly. "Video from the cameras. Recordings. Paperwork they've moved. Even bank transfers." Linda's words tumbled out faster now, years of trust making her speak without hesitation. "Emily wired $5,000 to a lawyer named Carter last month. I overheard them threatening to forge my signature on property documents. They're plotting to sell my home and put me in Sunrise Home." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, a mixture of shame and rage. There was a long silence, only the hum of the phone line between them. Then Dr. Peterson spoke, his tone firmer, more deliberate. "Linda, listen to me. I've known you for 2 decades. I have your entire medical and cognitive history. You're not delusional. Your memory tests are solid, your checkups spotless. What you're describing isn't paranoia, it's an accurate perception of a real threat. Linda closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her cheek. Tears sprang up but didn't fall. Instead, she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in days, someone was confirming what she knew in her bones. So I'm not losing it, she whispered. No, Dr. Peterson said firmly. You're lucid and competent. And now you've taken the right step by calling me. We'll document everything on our side too. You're not alone. Linda opened her eyes and stared at her reflection in the microwave door, tired, pale, but standing tall. The city outside was still gray, but in her chest a flicker of light appeared. After days of gaslighting, she finally had a lifeline and a witness. That same Monday afternoon, after the tense call, Linda drove herself to Dr. Peterson's clinic on Northeast Glisson Street. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee from a machine in the corner. She sat on one of the vinyl chairs, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield, while a wall-mounted TV murmured the noon news. When the nurse called her name, she rose slowly but with purpose, walking past a row of elderly patients who glanced at her with mild curiosity. Inside his office, Dr. Peterson shut the door gently and motioned her to sit. His bookshelves were lined with medical texts and a framed photo of his children at the Oregon coast. All right, Linda, he said quietly, let's do this properly. I want you to leave here today with hard evidence of your competence. He laid out 3 steps on a yellow legal pad, writing them down as he spoke. First, we'll run a full cognitive assessment right now, memory recall, reasoning, spatial orientation. Second, I'll refer you to a private investigator who specializes in elder abuse cases. Third, I'll connect you with a lawyer who works exclusively on senior protection rights in Oregon. He looked up, meeting her eyes. You're going to build a wall of proof they can't touch. For the next 2 hours, Linda followed every test with quiet concentration. She recited lists backwards, solved little puzzles with colored blocks, and named every U.S. state capital without hesitation. She even chuckled once, saying, "You're making me feel like I'm back teaching 3rd grade again." Dr. Peterson smiled but kept marking her scores. By the end, his clipboard was filled with perfect marks. Linda, he said, signing his name at the bottom of the final sheet, you scored at the top of every category. You are officially competent and mentally sound. He stamped the report with his practice seal and slid it across the desk. Keep this safe. It's your first shield. Linda took the papers with both hands, feeling their weight as if it were armor. Thank you, she whispered. He added softly, don't show it to them yet. Act normal. Let them think their plan is working. Back at Maple Avenue, the late afternoon sun slanted through the curtains when she opened the front door. She set her handbag down by the coat rack, schooling her face into calm. Daniel was sitting on the couch, scrolling on his phone. He looked up, eyes searching hers. So, he asked casually, what did Dr. Peterson say? Linda let out a small laugh and shrugged, slipping off her coat. Oh, just stress, she said lightly, he thinks I've been overdoing it. Daniel nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to his phone. Inside, her heart was still racing, but now with a sense of strategy, not fear. That night, after washing the dinner dishes, she quietly picked up her cell and dialed the number Dr. Peterson had scribbled for her, Mark Stevens, private investigator in downtown Portland. Mr. Stevens, she said when he answered. I need your help. It's about my daughter and son-in-law. On the afternoon of March 20th, a light drizzle drummed against the windows of the old Maple Avenue house. Upstairs, Linda lay on her bed with the curtains half drawn, listening to Emily and Daniel's muffled voices downstairs as they watched TV. They thought she was napping. In reality, she had her cell phone pressed tightly to her ear, whispering into it. Mr. Stevens, this is Linda Parker, she said, her voice low but urgent. I'm ready. I need direct evidence, something undeniable. Mark Stevens, the private investigator Dr. Peterson had recommended, spoke calmly on the other end. She pictured his lined, thoughtful face in some office downtown. "We can do that, Mrs. Parker," he said. "But it requires you to participate. Are you willing to wear a hidden microphone?" Linda's fingers trembled around the phone. "Is that even legal?" she whispered, glancing toward the hallway as though the walls had ears. "Completely," Mark reassured her. "It's your home, your property, your conversations. In Oregon, you're allowed to record as a participant. We'll handle the technical side. All you have to do is act natural and guide them into revealing what they're doing." She exhaled slowly, feeling a strange blend of fear and determination. "All right," she said at last. "I'll do it." The next morning, just after sunrise, a silver sedan pulled discreetly into her driveway. Mark and a young technician named Louise stepped out carrying small black cases that looked like laptop bags. Linda opened the door in her pale blue cardigan and motioned them in quickly. The smell of coffee and the faint creak of the wooden floor filled the hallway as they walked toward the dining room. Louise unpacked a set of tiny devices no bigger than shirt buttons. "This will clip inside your cardigan," he explained softly, his fingers steady. "And these two, one will go under the edge of the dining table, the other inside the ceramic fruit bowl. They'll give us perfect audio and video." Linda watched, fascinated and anxious, as he worked with the precision of a watchmaker. Mark adjusted the lapel of her sweater himself. "We're good to go," he said. "Remember, don't accuse them directly yet. Just start looking at documents, ask innocent questions. Let them talk. The more casual you are, the more they'll reveal." By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the stage was set. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Sunlight slanted across the family photos on the wall: Emily's graduation, Daniel at a barbecue, her late husband in his Navy uniform. Linda sat at the dining table, her hands folded atop a pile of papers. Her cardigan concealed the tiny microphone. She could feel its cold metal against her skin like a secret heartbeat. Emily and Daniel entered, Daniel carrying a thick folder. "We thought we could go over these forms again," Emily said sweetly, sliding into a chair. Linda forced a small smile, nodding. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Let's take a look together." As they spread out the papers, the once familiar room felt transformed, less like a family home and more like a laboratory. The two people she had raised and welcomed into her house were now, in her mind, specimens under glass, unaware of the invisible eyes and ears capturing their every word. That Tuesday afternoon, March 21st, a pale shaft of light slanted across the dining room table of the old Maple Avenue house. The lemon scent from Linda's morning cleaning still lingered. On the wall, the clock ticked steadily like a metronome for a scene she had rehearsed in her mind. She sat at the head of the table in her navy cardigan, hands folded loosely, a faint tremor hidden beneath her calm exterior. Beneath the wool, the tiny microphone Mark had clipped hummed silently. Every word, every breath, was being captured. Daniel entered first, carrying the thick beige folder that had become a fixture in recent days. Emily followed with a legal pad and a pen tucked behind her ear, her expression carefully arranged into patience. "Okay, Mom," Daniel said smoothly, pulling out a chair beside her, "let's go through these forms one more time so you'll feel comfortable." His voice was low, reassuring, but Linda noticed the quick flick of his eyes toward Emily, checking, calculating. He spread the papers out, tapping each page as if teaching a class. "This one is just a medical power of attorney," he explained, "and this one helps us manage bills if you're too tired." Emily chimed in, "It's really for your benefit, Mom. Things move fast these days." Their tone was sugar, but Linda could feel the steel beneath it. She tilted her head, feigning mild confusion. "And if," she asked softly, tracing a finger along the dense text, "the two of you decide my memory isn't so good anymore, what happens then?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Daniel's pen froze mid-gesture. Emily's smile faltered. Linda leaned closer, her voice still gentle but her eyes sharp. "This clause here," she tapped a paragraph with her nail, the sound like a tiny hammer strike, "says you can sell the house without my permission. Isn't that right? Emily forced a laugh. That's only for emergencies, Mom. Like if you were hospitalized. Linda raised her gaze and asked quietly, and what about the $700,000 in Sunrise home? Her words landed like stones thrown into a still pond. Daniel's face drained of color, Emily's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel stammered, glancing at his wife. But Linda kept going, her tone almost conversational. Mr. Carter. The $5,000 you wired to him last month. The forged signature on my pension documents. She listed each item like a teacher reading a roll call, her heart hammering in her chest but her face serene. Inside she was thinking, keep talking. Just keep talking. Daniel's composure cracked. He slammed the folder shut with a sharp thud. We erased all your evidence anyway, he blurted, his voice rising. Emily's lips curled into a sly, almost triumphant smile. That USB drive you thought you hid? Gone. Those messages you saved? Fake now, she said, leaning back as if she had one. But in their rush to gloat, they forgot the cardigan. They forgot the camera's mark had hidden under the table and in the fruit bowl. Each self-incriminating word, every sneer and slip, was being recorded in high definition. Linda sat back slowly, folding her hands in her lap, feeling the cold metal of the microphone against her skin like a secret ally. They thought they had erased her evidence, they didn't realize they were creating new evidence by the second. Across the table, the people she had once called family were unraveling. The trap she'd set so carefully was no longer a plan, it was reality, and it was closing around them. The clock in the dining room had just struck 4 when the tension reached a breaking point. Outside, the sky over Portland was a heavy gray, the kind that seemed to press down on the old Maple Avenue house. Inside, Linda sat at the end of the dining table, her cardigan buttoned to the throat, her hands resting lightly on the documents Daniel had spread before her. Emily stood now, no longer pretending to be patient or kind. Her eyes were sharp, her voice low and venomous. She leaned closer until Linda could smell her perfume. If you don't sign, we go to Plan B, she hissed. We'll get a certificate saying you're insane, ship you off to some cut-rate home, and sell this place to build a future without you. Daniel's mask cracked too. He crossed his arms, his tone cold and clipped. Face it, Mom. You're no use to us anymore. You've had your time. We're done waiting. His words were like stones dropped into her chest. For a moment, Linda felt the sting of betrayal run up her spine like ice. These were the people she'd fed, clothed, loved. But she stood up slowly, pushing her chair back with a measured scrape against the wooden floor. She straightened her shoulders, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Do you have no shame? She asked quietly. No remorse for betraying the woman who raised you? Her question hung in the air. Emily sneered. Daniel gave a short, mocking laugh. You've been manipulating us for years, he snapped. You're the one who's toxic. Linda turned her back on them for a heartbeat, walking to the sideboard where a simple ballpoint pen lay beside a notepad. She picked it up, turned back, and looked directly into Emily's eyes. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. I'm an old woman, yes, she said, but not so old or foolish that I'll sign my own death warrant. She let the pen slip from her fingers. It hit the table with a soft clatter that somehow echoed louder than Daniel's threats. The room went very still. Linda's heart was hammering, but she kept her face serene. She knew what was about to happen. And right on cue, the front door opened with a firm knock and then swung wide. Heavy footsteps crossed the threshold. Mark Stevens, the private investigator, stepped in first, his badge hanging from a chain. Behind him came attorney Janet Harris, a slim woman in a navy suit, followed by 2 uniformed officers from the Portland Police Bureau. Emily Parker. Daniel Hughes, one of the officers said clearly, his voice filling the room. You are under arrest for elder financial exploitation, forgery, and abuse. Mark's eyes flicked to Linda with a tiny nod. Everything had been recorded. Emily's bravado crumbled, her mouth opened but no sound came. Daniel's arms dropped to his sides as the officer snapped handcuffs over his wrists. "This is a mistake," he tried, but his voice was weak. Janet Harris laid a stack of printed transcripts on the table. "Every word you've spoken today is documented," she said evenly. Linda sat back down in her chair as the scene unfolded. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like hers again. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even the muffled sound of the drizzle outside seemed softer. She drew a deep breath and released it slowly. Silence, at last, wasn't a weapon or a threat, it was peace. As the front door closed behind the officers and their two handcuffed suspects, a strange quiet settled over the Maple Avenue house. Linda stayed seated at the table, her hands resting on the wooden surface that had just been a battlefield. For the first time in months, she could hear the simple, steady sound of her own breathing. The documents, the recordings, the tears, all of it had led to this moment. Her cardigan still hid the microphone, now silent but victorious. She reached up, unpinned it slowly, and placed it on the table like a trophy. Mark Stevens gave her a gentle nod. "It's over now, Mrs. Parker," he said softly. Janet Harris added, "You were brave to take these steps. You've protected not just yourself, but a lot of other seniors watching this may learn from your courage." Linda looked down at her hands, remembering the pancakes she had cooked, the lullabies she had sung, the sacrifices she had made. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I just wanted to be safe in my own home." This story began with a 70-year-old widow in Portland who welcomed her daughter and son-in-law into her house believing it was love and care. It unfolded into secret recordings, forged papers, and a plan to take everything she had built. But by trusting her instincts, seeking help from professionals, and refusing to sign away her future, Linda turned from victim to witness, from witness to protector. In the end, justice walked through her front door. If you've been moved by Linda's story, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more real-life stories like this. Leave a comment saying "I'm listening" so we know you're here with us and we can stay connected as we continue to bring you stories that matter. No one should feel alone or powerless in their own home. There is always help, and there is always hope, and your voice, your courage, can change everything. See you in the next video.